colony world was quiet that night. Ethan liked nights like these. The air was cool, the desert winds whispered over the metal roofs, and the two pale moons painted the land in silver light. He was a mechanic. Nothing more, nothing less. His life was simple. Fix the engines of transport haulers, mend the colony's power lines, and sometimes patch up the farm equipment of the settlers. When the day ended, he would sit outside his small workshop with a cup of bitter tea. Listening to the hum of the generators in the distance, he thought this night would be no different. But fate rarely announces itself before it arrives. At first, it was only a sound-soft, uneven footsteps in the dust. Not the heavy boots of a colonist, nor the sharp click of machinery. These steps were light, fragile, almost stumbling. Ethan frowned and set down his cup. Few people visited his workshop after dark. He reached for the lantern by the door and turned it on. A warm yellow glow spilled across the ground. That was when he saw her. At the edge of the light stood a figure. Small, thin, trembling. For a moment, Ethan thought it was a child. But when she lifted her head, he froze. She wasn't human. Her skin gleamed faintly, like silver glass catching the moonlight. Her eyes were far too large, too luminous, reflecting the lantern as if they carried stars inside them. Her clothes, or what remained of them, were torn, streaked with dust and blood that glowed faint blue. She swayed, as though standing itself was a battle. Ethan's first thought was that she was hurt. His second thought was that she was terrified. "Hey." His voice was soft, careful, as if speaking too loud might break her. "Are you all right?" The girl took a shaky step closer, then stopped. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling quickly. Ethan noticed the way her hands trembled. Her long fingers curled tightly into her palms. She looked like someone who had run for miles, someone with nowhere left to go. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. Her accent was strange, her words uncertain, but the meaning was clear. "Human, I need your help." Ethan blinked. She could speak his language. Not fluently, not smoothly, but enough. And in those few words, he heard something raw and desperate. He took one cautious step forward. She didn't move, didn't flinch, only stared at him with those star-filled eyes. Up close, Ethan could see her wounds more clearly. A gash on her shoulder, still glowing faintly with blue light. A scrape across her temple, bruises that covered her arms. Whoever she was, whatever had happened to her, it hadn't been kind. "I'll help," Ethan said. "But you've got to tell me what you need." Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally forced out the words. Words Ethan never expected. "Marry me." For a heartbeat, silence swallowed the night. Ethan stared at her. He thought he had misheard. Maybe she had meant help me, maybe hide me, maybe save me. But no. Her eyes, glistening with tears, held steady on his. Her voice, though shaking, was firm. "Marry me," she repeated. Ethan's mouth went dry. Of all the requests she could have made, food, medicine, shelter, that was the last thing he thought she'd say. His brain scrambled for sense. Why? Why marriage? Why him? He searched her face, and what he saw made his heart ache. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't some strange alien ritual or joke. This was a plea born out of fear. She wasn't asking out of love. She was asking out of desperation. Why? Ethan whispered. The alien girl's eyes filled with tears, the liquid shimmering like crystal. Her voice broke as she answered. "They will take me. My people are gone. I am alone. If I have no bond, I am nothing. Yours, your kind, protects a mate." Yes. She swallowed hard, her whole body shaking now. "Please, marry me. Please save me." The desert wind carried her words into the night, and Ethan felt something stir inside him. He didn't understand her customs. He didn't know who they were or what horrors she had fled. But he knew this much, in her trembling form, in her breaking voice, was someone who had nothing left but hope, and she was placing all of that. Hope in him. Ethan's heart was still pounding from the alien girl's words. "Marry me." He stood frozen, lantern light flickering across her fragile frame. It felt absurd, impossible, like something out of a fever dream. She was trembling, wounded, looking at him with eyes full of desperation. It wasn't a proposal born of love. It was a plea for survival. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The desert winds brushed against the tin walls of his workshop, the silence stretching heavy between them. He swallowed hard. "You don't mean that," he said finally, his voice low, uncertain. Her lips parted. She took one step closer, her movements weak but determined. "I do." Her words were quiet, broken, yet there was no hesitation. She stood there in the dust, shoulders trembling, but her gaze was locked on him. As if this single moment, this one question, would decide whether she lived or died. Ethan shook his head, trying to make sense of it. "You're hurt. You need medicine, food, rest, not marriage." Her chest rose sharply, as though his refusal was already cutting her apart. Tears swelled again in her strange silver eyes, and her voice cracked. "You don't understand? Without a bond, I am prey. If I have no one, they will take me. Sell me, kill me. Your kind protects a mate. That is why I ask you." Ethan felt something twist deep in his chest. He had heard stories of raiders, of mercenary groups who trafficked the weak and the lost. He had never imagined one of their victims would stumble to his door. And yet here she was, alone, terrified, begging him for a shield stronger than walls or weapons. Begging him for the simple word husband. He rubbed a hand over his face, trying to think. This wasn't what he had signed up for when he became a mechanic on a quiet colony. He had chosen this life to avoid complications, to keep away from war and politics. But looking at her now, Ethan felt that choice slipping away. He stepped closer, gently reaching out his hand. She flinched at the movement, then froze, waiting. Ethan didn't touch her wounds, only lifted the blanket from his bench and carefully draped it over her shoulders. She shivered beneath it, but her breathing slowed, just slightly. "Listen," Ethan said softly. "I don't know your customs. I don't know what marriage means to your people. But if what you need is safety, I can give you that. If standing beside me makes them leave you alone, then I'll do it." The alien girl stared at him, her lips trembling as if she didn't dare believe him. Then her knees buckled, and Ethan caught her just before she collapsed. Her body was light, too light, as if she hadn't eaten properly in weeks. She clutched the blanket tighter around herself, eyes closing for a moment, as if exhaustion was pulling her under. Then, with a weak breath, she whispered, "You mean it?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, I mean it." Let out a sound that was not quite a sob, not quite a laugh, something broken and relieved all at once. Her tears spilled freely now, glowing faintly as they slid down her silver cheeks. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered. "But thank you. Thank you." Ethan eased her into his workshop, laying her carefully on the cot he sometimes used for naps during long repair shifts. He fetched clean water and bandages, his hands steady despite the storm of thoughts in his mind, as he worked to clean her wounds. She watched him with tired, wondering eyes, as if every small kindness was a miracle she had never expected. When he finished, he sat beside her, exhaustion settling heavy in his bones. He still didn't fully understand, but he knew one thing. She had come to him because she had no one else, and he had said yes. The alien girl closed her eyes, whispering something soft in her own language, a prayer, perhaps, or a vow. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling behind them. That night, in the quiet of his workshop, under the weight of 2 moons, a bond had begun. Not of love, not yet, but of survival, and for her, that was enough. Ethan did not sleep much that night. He sat on a chair beside the cot, watching the strange girl wrapped in a blanket, her silver skin faintly glowing in the moonlight. Her breathing was shallow, but steady now, no longer ragged with fear. Every so often she murmured in her own language, soft sounds that seemed almost like music, though broken by pain. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, trying to make sense of what had happened. Just hours ago, his world had been small. Fix engines. Drink tea, sleep, repeat, and now. An alien girl had asked him to marry her, begged him. Early on he had said yes. The words had left his lips almost without thought, but he didn't regret them. Something in her eyes, in her trembling voice, had told him she was standing on the edge of despair. If he had turned her away, she might not have survived another night. Still, his chest felt heavy. Marriage. To him, marriage had always been a quiet dream for some far-off future. He imagined meeting someone, sharing laughter, building a home together. Not this. Not desperation. Not survival. But then he looked at her, against, so fragile, so lost. A different thought came. Maybe it didn't matter how it began. Maybe what mattered was that he had been there when she needed someone most. When the dawn came. Painting the desert sky orange and gold, Ethan stood and stretched. His bones ached from the chair, but his mind was clear. He had made his choice. He would protect her. The girl stirred, opening her eyes slowly. For a moment she looked confused, as though she had forgotten where she was. Then she saw him, and relief softened her face. "You stayed?" she whispered. "Of course," Ethan said. "Where else would I go?" Her lips trembled with the hint of a smile, weak but real. She sat up with effort, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. Ethan quickly fetched water and bread from the small kitchen corner. She ate cautiously, as though she wasn't sure her body would accept it, but the color returned to her cheeks little by little when she finished. She looked at him with a seriousness that made his chest tighten. "You agreed," she said softly, "to bond, to be mate." "I did." She lowered her eyes, almost ashamed. "You do not understand what it means." "Then explain it to me," Ethan replied gently. "Help me understand." She hesitated, then spoke, her words halting but clear enough. "My people are gone. Hunters took them. I escaped, but they will come again. Without bond, I am nothing. Alone, I have no right, no shield. If I am made of a human, I cannot be taken. Your kind protects its own. Yes." Ethan's jaw tightened. So it was true, Shay wasn't exaggerating. There were people out there who wanted to capture her, sell her, maybe worse. She had been running from them, hiding until she found him. He sat down beside her, meeting her eyes. "I don't know if human law works the same way you think it does. But I do know this. If anyone comes for you, they'll have to go through me first." Her eyes widened, shimmering with tears again. Slowly, carefully, she reached out her hand. Ethan hesitated, then took it. Her fingers were long and delicate, her skin strangely cool, but her grip was fierce, desperate. You choose me?" she whispered. "Yes," Ethan said simply. "I choose you." The words hung in the air, heavy and real. For the first time, the girl's body seemed to relax. She let out a long, trembling breath, as if she'd been holding it for days. Her head bowed, and a few glowing tears slid down her cheeks. "Then I am safe," she whispered. "Then I am not alone." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. In that moment, something shifted inside him. She was no longer just a stranger who stumbled into his life. She was someone who needed him, someone who had placed her trust entirely in him. And that trust was not a burden. It was a vow. He would keep her safe. Whatever it took. Outside, the colony stirred to life. The hum of engines, the calls of workers, the clang of tools. But inside that small workshop, beneath the soft morning light, two lives had already changed forever. And Ethan knew, deep in his heart, that there was no turning back. For a short while, life in the workshop became quiet again. Ethan thought maybe, just maybe, things would settle. The alien girl whom he had begun calling Lyra after she whispered her name one night was healing. Her wounds closed slowly under careful bandages, her strength returning little by little. During the days she stayed inside, sitting quietly as Ethan worked on engines. Sometimes she asked small questions in broken English tool name, or what this do, and he would answer patiently. At night, she slept without fear for the first time in weeks. Wrapped in his blanket, a faint glow from her silver skin softening the dark room, Ethan started to think of her less as a stranger, and more as someone who belonged there. Someone who filled the silence of his once empty workshop. He almost allowed himself to believe she was safe, but safety never lasts long. It began with shadows in the sky. Ethan noticed them first one morning as he stepped outside to fetch supplies. A shape too large to be a bird crossed the sun-swept clouds. Then another. They were dark, metallic, moving with precision. Not colony craft. Not settlers. By nightfall, the truth came. A warship, massive and cruel, hovered above the horizon, its engines rumbling like thunder. The colonists whispered in fear. They knew the type: mercenaries, scavengers, hunters, the kind who made their living from the suffering of others. Ethan felt his blood run cold. They weren't here by accident. They were here for her. Inside the workshop, Lyra sensed it too. She pressed herself against the wall, her luminous eyes wide with terror as she stared out the window. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "They found me." Ethan clenched his fists. "You're not alone anymore. They can't just take you." But Lyra shook her head, her hands gripping the blanket tight around her. "They will. They don't care for law. They don't care for words. They will come, and I." She trailed off, her voice breaking. Ethan knelt beside her, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Listen to me. You said being my mate meant protection, right? Then that's what I'll give you. If they want you, they'll have to go through me first." Her lips parted, but no words came. She only stared at him, as though trying to decide if she could believe him, if one human could stand. Against the storm that had chased her across the stars, the storm came sooner than expected. 2 nights later, the mercenaries descended. Their ship loomed over the colony, its engines rattling rooftops. Armed soldiers poured into the streets, their armor glinting under the twin moons. They kicked down doors, dragging frightened settlers from their homes. Demanding answers. Ethan heard the chaos long before it reached him, the screams. The shouts, the heavy boots pounding through the dust. Lyra clung to his arm, trembling violently. Her glow dimmed with fear, as if her very life was fading. When the mercenaries finally reached his workshop, the door burst open with a crash. Ethan stood in front of Lyra instantly, shielding her with his body. His heart hammered in his chest, but his voice was steady. The leader, a broad man with a scarred face, sneered. "We're looking for cargo. Small. Silver skin. You've seen her?" Ethan's hand tightened into a fist, but he didn't move. "She's not cargo. She's my wife." The words fell heavy in the silence that followed. For a moment, the soldiers glanced at each other, uncertain. But then the leader laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Wife. That thing." He stepped forward, eyeing Lyra like prey. "Doesn't matter what you call her. She's worth a fortune. Hand her over, mechanic. Don't make this hard." Lyra pressed closer to Ethan's back, her breath shallow, her whole body trembling. Ethan felt her fear as if it were his own. And in that instant, all hesitation burned away. He stood taller, meeting the mercenary's gaze without flinching. "No, she stays with me." The leader's smile vanished. His hand dropped to the weapon at his side. Around him, soldiers shifted, preparing for violence. The air grew heavy, electric with the promise of blood. Ethan's heart pounded, but he did not step aside. He had made his choice the night she asked him. He would not break it now. Behind him, he heard Lyra whisper his name, so soft, so fragile. And he knew this was the moment their bond would be tested. If he failed, she was lost. If he stood, they might still have a chance. And so, with the mercenaries closing in, Ethan clenched his fists and prepared for the fight of his life. The workshop shook as the mercenaries stormed inside. Weapons raised, boots hammering against the metal floor. Ethan's heart pounded. But he did not move from his place in front of Lyra. His body was the only shield she had. The scarred leader smirked, his hand still resting on the gun at his belt. "Last chance, mechanic. Step aside. She doesn't belong to you." Ethan's voice was steady, though fear burned inside him. "She's my wife. That means she's under human protection. You know what happens if you break colony law?" The soldiers laughed. One spat on the floor. Law means nothing out here. Before Ethan could react, one of them lunged forward, grabbing for Lyra's arm. She cried out, her glow flickering wildly. Ethan moved without thinking. His fist slammed into the soldier's jaw. Sending the man crashing against the wall, the workshop erupted into chaos. Another soldier swung a metal baton at Ethan. Pain exploded across his ribs, but he didn't fall. He shoved the man back, grabbing a wrench from his workbench and swinging it with all his strength. The blow landed, metal against armor, and the soldier staggered. "Stay behind me," Ethan shouted over his shoulder. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with terror. But then, sparks flickered at her fingertips, small bursts of blue light that crackled like tiny stars. She didn't know if she could fight, but she knew she couldn't just watch him fall. The leader sneered. "Stupid human. You think you can fight us all?" Ethan's chest heaved, sweat dripping into his eyes, pain screaming in his body. But his grip on the wrench tightened. "I don't need to fight all of you. I just need to keep her safe." The soldier rushed forward. Ethan swung again, but this time the weapon was torn from his hand. A fist smashed into his face, and blood filled his mouth. He stumbled, knees buckling. "Ethan." Lyra's voice cracked, filled with terror. He staggered to his feet, forcing his body to stand. He would not fall. Not while she was watching. Not while she depended on him. Then something changed. Lyra, shaking and terrified, raised her glowing hands. Blue sparks leapt into the air, filling the workshop with crackling light. The soldiers paused, startled. The glow grew brighter, humming with energy that made the air vibrate. With a cry, Lyra released it. A wave of blue light burst from her palms, slamming into the nearest soldier. He flew backward, crashing into a table that shattered under his weight. Another soldier dropped his weapon, screaming as sparks crawled across his armor. For a heartbeat, the mercenaries faltered. Fear flickered in their eyes. Ethan, panting and bloody, looked back at Lyra. She was trembling, her strength draining, but she stood tall, her hands still glowing faintly. "You will not take me," she whispered, her voice shaking but fierce. "I am not alone," the leader snarled, furious. "You'll pay for that, alien?" He drew his gun, aiming straight at her. Ethan didn't think. He moved. He threw himself between the gun and Lyra just as the weapon fired. The shot grazed his shoulder, burning pain tearing through him. He crashed to the floor, gasping. Lyra screamed his name, dropping beside him, her tears glowing bright as they fell onto his skin. The mercenaries stepped back, uncertain now. The fight no longer so simple. Ethan forced himself up again, swaying but unbroken. His voice was hoarse, but every word carried fire. "You're not taking her. Not while I'm still breathing." For the first time, the mercenaries hesitated. They had seen desperate men before, but there was something different here. This wasn't greed or madness. This was devotion and yielding, human stubbornness, the kind of force that didn't break even when beaten down. The leader cursed, signaling his men. "Fall back. Not worth it tonight." One by one, the soldiers retreated, dragging their injured with them. The workshop was left in ruined, tables overturned, tools scattered, blood on the floor. The ship's engines roared outside as the mercenaries pulled. Back into the dark sky, the silence afterward was deafening. Ethan collapsed to his knees, clutching his shoulder. Lyra caught him, holding him up with trembling arms. Her tears dripped onto his skin, glowing faint blue. Yes. As if even her grief carried light. "You fool," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You nearly died for me." Ethan managed a weak, bloodied smile. "You asked me to be your husband. That means I don't run. Not ever." Her hands shook as she pressed her forehead against his, a gesture that needed no translation. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "I only asked because I was desperate. I answered because I chose to," Ethan said softly. For a long moment, she held him as if he was the only anchor, keeping her from falling apart. Outside, the colony slowly returned to silence, but inside the workshop, something stronger than fear had taken root. They had fought together. They had survived, and now their bond was no longer just words. It was forged in fire. The night after the battle was heavy and quiet. The mercenaries had left, but their presence still lingered in every broken tool, every shattered board, and every drop of blood on the floor. Ethan sat slumped against the wall, his shirt torn, his shoulder bandaged with whatever cloth Lyra could find. The pain in his body was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the look in her eyes. Lyra knelt beside him, her silver hands trembling as she tried to clean the blood from his skin. Her tears kept falling, glowing faintly as they dropped onto the cloth. Each time she touched him, her breath hitched, as though she feared he would vanish if she blinked. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered, her voice raw. "You could have given me to them, and you would still be safe." "Why? Why would you fight for me?" Ethan managed a tired smile, though his lips were cracked and his face bruised. "Because you needed someone. That's reason enough." Her hands froze. She stared at him, her eyes wide, her mouth parting as if she had no words for that answer. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the distant generators and the soft desert wind brushing against the walls. Lyra lowered her head, her tears dripping onto the floor. "When I asked you to marry me, I was not honest. I didn't ask because I wanted a husband. I asked because I was desperate. I thought you would only be my shield, nothing more. I never expected you to." Her voice broke, her shoulders shaking. "I never expected you to bleed for me." Ethan reached out slowly, his hand resting over hers. Her skin was cool, trembling under his touch. "You don't have to apologize for being desperate. Anyone would be. But I need you to understand something, Lyra. I didn't fight because of a word like marriage. I fought because you're not a thing to be taken. You're someone worth protecting." Her lips trembled and she let out a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. What if I am not worth it?" Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He was so tired, but his voice carried strength. "Then I'll decide that for myself. And right now, you're worth everything." Lyra pressed her glowing forehead against his, a gesture soft and sacred. Her breath shivered against his cheek. "No one has ever said that to me," she whispered. "Not even my own people." Her tears touched his skin, warm despite their light. Ethan felt something stirred deep inside him, something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't just duty anymore. It wasn't just survival. Somewhere between her fear and his stubbornness, something real had been born. For a long while, she simply held him, as if he was the anchor that kept her from floating into the void. The night wrapped around them, but neither felt alone anymore. Later, when she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, steadier. "You are not just my shield, Ethan. You are my home now." Those words struck deeper than any wound. Ethan opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. He saw no desperation there now, no fear. Only a fragile hope, fragile but alive. "You're my home too." He whispered back, her hands tightened around his, delicate fingers gripping as though she would never let go. For the first time, Lyra smiled, a small, trembling smile, but a real one. And in that moment, Ethan realized the truth. What began as desperation had become something stronger, something unbreakable. The night slowly gave way to dawn. Light spilled across the desert, chasing away the shadows. Inside the workshop, among broken tools and blood-stained floors, two souls sat close, no longer strangers, no longer alone. They had survived the storm. And in the quiet after the violence, they had found something worth living for. The days after the attack passed slowly. It's like the calm after a storm. The mercenaries never returned. Maybe the fight had cost them more than they expected. Or maybe the sight of a human willing to stand and bleed for an alien girl had made them think twice. Word spread quickly through the colony. The mechanic who fought off raiders, the alien girl who glowed with strange light. People whispered their story in hushed voices, half in awe and half in disbelief. But inside the little workshop, life was quieter. Broken tables were fixed, shattered tools were gathered, and the blood was washed away. The scars remained, but the space felt warm again. Ethan healed slowly. His shoulder burned when he lifted heavy things, and his ribs ached with every movement, but he carried on. Lyra never left his side. She helped where she could, handing him tools, learning the names of machines, watching him work with quiet fascination. Her English grew stronger each day, her voice soft but steady as she practiced at night. When the two moons rose, they sat outside together. Ethan with his tea, Lyra with her glowing eyes, turned toward the stars. She no longer looked like a hunted creature. She looked like someone who had begun to belong. One evening, as the desert wind whispered over the sand, Lyra leaned against him. Her silver skin reflected the moonlight, her head resting gently on his shoulder. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at her, puzzled. "Regret what?" "Marrying me," she whispered. "Fighting for me. Choosing me when you could have stayed alone and safe." He was quiet for a moment, staring at the horizon. Then he shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "No, I don't regret it. You turned my quiet little life into something bigger. Harder? Yes. Dangerous? Yes. But also worth it." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "I thought when I asked you I was begging only for life. I didn't think I would find more than that. But now," her voice caught, trembling with emotion, "now I think I found love." Ethan's chest tightened at her words. He reached for her hand, weaving his fingers gently through hers. "So did I," he said simply. They sat there in silence, hands entwined, hearts steady. For the first time, Lyra was not afraid of tomorrow. For the first time, Ethan felt his life was no longer just about fixing machines and drinking tea under the moons. It was about someone else now. It was about them. The colony soon accepted Lyra, not with grand gestures, but with quiet kindness. Farmers left food by the workshop door. Children peeked in to watch her glow in the evenings, laughing when she smiled back. Neighbors began to greet her in halting English, and she greeted them in return. Slowly, the fear faded. She was no longer the alien girl. She was Ethan's wife. She was part of the colony. Still, on some nights, Lyra would wake from dreams with tears in her eyes, whispering about her lost people, about the families and friends she would never see again. Ethan would hold her through the trembling, his hand warm against her back, reminding her she wasn't alone anymore. And in the quiet that followed, she would whisper back, "Home. I am home." Time passed. Scars healed. The mercenaries never returned. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost ordinary, though it was built on extraordinary beginnings. One night, under the soft glow of the twin moons, Ethan turned to her. His voice was quiet, but steady. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me?" Her lips curved in a small, trembling smile. "Yes, I asked you to marry me. And do you remember what I said?" "You said yes," she whispered, her eyes glowing with tears. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Back then, I said yes because you needed someone. But now I say yes because I want no one else."